Hello, welcome to Anatomy and Physiology. I'm Mr. Buffler. I'll be your teacher. Many of you have had me before in the past, but hello if I have never met you. So we're going to start off today with a video lecture. Some days we'll just use an audio lecture because we really won't need to do video. But since this was the introduction, I thought this would be appropriate. Typically, all the lectures will accompany your lecture slides that I will post on Classroom, and we'll use that to communicate with each other. So to begin, at least for a little bit, talking about the first chapter in anatomy, we need to talk a little bit about what is anatomy and physiology. They are not quite the same thing. So anatomy is the structure of something, how something is built. Physiology is what does that structure do, or how does that structure do what it does. A good example might be a lung. Okay, we can look at how the lung is built with all these air pockets and your bronchi and everything else, and be like, this is built this way. The physiology is, okay, so how does it actually exchange gas inside of here? Not how it's built, but how does it get oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide from your body? So that's the difference between anatomy and physiology. One is structure, anatomy, and physiology's function. How does it do something, right? So that actually guides us how we look at the human body. Sometimes in this course, we'll focus a little more on the anatomy, the structure, like the skeletal system. You'll have to know all the bones. Physiology would be more like the nervous system. It's not that complex of anatomy, but it's a very, very complex physiology. How do you actually hold memories? That's really complicated. So, but it's important, so we'll spend more time looking at that. As far as anatomy goes, you can look at microanatomy, where you need magnification, and you'd study cells and tissues and organs. This would be like if you ever had a sample taken of a skin sample, and then they had to take it off and send it to a lab, and somebody has to look at it and say, is this normal? Is it not normal? That would be microanatomy. Specifically, that would be histology, which is study of tissues. Macroanatomy or gross anatomy, gross just means on a larger scale, would be no magnification needed. You study the surface. Sometimes in college you'll have gross anatomy labs. It's not because they're gross, but kind of because they use cadavers, and you'll look at a dead body and be able to tell overall general anatomy on that human. Physiology, remember, it's the function, how things work. A good example for this might be that if someone's having some problems with something and they go to see a specialist, and that specialist only studies your circulatory system or your digestive system or something like that. Your specialized medical doctors really understand the physiology of one particular system very, very well. Okay, as far as levels of organization go in biology, also in anatomy, we start off with the idea that life is very organized. That is, you take molecules that are built the same way and you organize those into enough of those, you can get a cell, and that cell's alive. And then you can take those living cells and you can take enough of those and you can get a tissue. Let's say you take enough molecules of protein and all this other complex stuff that gets organized just right, and you can build a muscle cell. You take enough muscle cells and you hook them together, you have muscle tissue, like a muscle or your heart or something, or getting ready to build a heart. Then you can take that muscle tissue and connective tissue and some other tissue, and you can build an organ. You take all that organ and everything that's connected to it, then you can build an organ system, like your respiratory system. Here's an organ from your respiratory system. Then you can put all those together and you can get one single organism if all of those different organs are working together. So this you saw this list in biology, more than likely. It's a great list of all those levels of organization in living things, and it's actually a really good list for us to look at from a human standpoint with human anatomy. It's going to guide our study. Next chapter, we'll spend some time looking at the chemical level of organization. After that, we'll look at cells. After that, we'll have another chapter that just covers tissues. After that, we'll be looking at all the different organ systems, of which there's 11 different systems in your body. Speaking of which, those 11 systems are your integumentary system, which sometimes we don't talk much about, but we see all the time because it's your hair and skin and nails, and that's your body's outer coating. Then we have the skeletal system, muscular, nervous, endocrine, cardiovascular, lymphatic, respiratory, digestive, urinary, and reproductive. And we'll take a look at all of those throughout the year. We'll spend a chapter on each one of those. One important idea that we have in anatomy is the idea of homeostasis. You've talked about this in biology. It's the idea that organisms maintain a stable internal environment. If you're not doing that, you're not alive anymore, because you shouldn't be like the outside of your body, shouldn't be like the inside of your body. So humans work really hard to do this. We maintain body temperature. We maintain blood sugar levels. We maintain certain electrolyte levels in our bloodstream. We maintain certain water levels. We maintain all sorts of things. And collectively, that all keeps us alive and running. And everything can be within these certain ranges, but if we get out of that range, we're no longer maintaining homeostasis, and we can't survive very good, like if we get too hot or too cold. And so a lot of times we'll talk about, if you have some sort of system, we'll talk about how do we regulate that system, because that's a big deal. We have to stay within certain ranges or we cannot survive. Okay, so let's talk about the language of anatomy. When you're looking at a human, we're three-dimensional. We're not just a two-dimensional diagram on a piece of paper. We are three-dimensional. I think I even have a diagram laying on my desk somewhere, all right, that I can't find right now. But we're three-dimensional. Hey, look, there's a two-dimensional diagram of a sponge on my wall, all right? But this really doesn't look like that, right? They should be like round and circular and three-dimensional, but we always see things on paper. But with humans, because we're three-dimensional, we need some sort of language and ways to find our way around our three-dimensional body. Instead of just saying go up or go down, we need better terminology. And so that leads us to this whole language of anatomy that we use to describe our way around living things. Specifically for us, it's around humans. So starting off, when we talk about anatomical landmarks, and you'll want to follow along with your slides at this point for sure, because I'm going to reference those. I'm looking at them right now. When we talk about anatomical landmarks, anatomical position is hands at side, standing up, facing forward. And if you look on any sort of anatomical diagram, it always has people standing up, for the most part, with their palms facing forward. That's your starting reference point that we call anatomical position. If someone's laying down, face up, it's called supine. If you're laying down, face down, it's called prone. So that actually is a term you may have heard if you watch any crime shows, and they'll be like, the victim was found laying in the prone position. It just means they're laying face down, all right, as opposed to face up. So those are terms that already start to show us a reference of how a human is going to be oriented. Another thing that helps us find our way around are body cavities. A cavity in your body is not like just a big empty hole. It's a region that's surrounded by something that there's something inside. So in this sense, we're going to look at four main body cavities. And those four main body cavities are your cranial cavity, where you keep your brain, your spinal cavity, that goes in your vertebrae, where your spine is protected, and then your thoracic cavity, like your chest cavity, it's your thorax or thoracic cavity. That's where you keep your heart and lungs, and it's surrounded by your ribs, which is great because it protects it. And then you have below that your abdominal cavity, where you got your abdomen, abdominal muscles, your abs, and your 12-pack of abs or whatever. And then you keep all of your digestive system in there, like your stomach and intestines and colon and everything else. All right? So those are some main body cavities. All right? We're going to come back after this. I'll post another video here, and we will look at anatomical directions. So if you want to go ahead and check that out, we'll get back to that next time. All right. Thanks.